Live from the sun-drenched cobblestones of the Eternal City, conversations crossing faith, culture, and current events. Civil discourse, civil debate, and the free exchange of ideas. This is Intersections with Bree Dail and Joey Meugniot. And now your hosts, Bree and Joey.
Good morning from the Eternal City. It is a beautiful spring morning. Happy Easter Monday to you all. This is Intersections, crossing faith, culture, and current events. My name is Bree Dail, and for those of you joining us for the first time, I am the international accredited journalist, including accreditation to the Holy See as the Rome correspondent for the Epoch Times. You can also find me on National Catholic Register and other outlets. I hold a BA in History from Christendom College and a master's degree in Foreign Policy and Diplomacy from the prestigious Norwich University, and I am joined by my ever-intrepid co-host, and just a regular great guy, Joey Meugniot. Joey?
Thanks for that intro, Bree. I appreciate that. So my name is Joey Meugniot. I'm a political advisor, small business consultant. I'm an analyst with the Defense Department and a U.S. Army veteran with 2 tours to Afghanistan. Now, I'm excited to share my thoughts and analysis on topics and issues and how oftentimes they are closely connected and intersect with one another. So a lot has happened in the last week since we last spoke. So on today's show, we'll get you caught up on a lot of the things that have happened over the last week and some things to look forward to. To get started, we've got some updates out of the Vatican that we'll get to from Bree in a second. And again, we've seen governments crack down on Christian worship. This time it's in the UK and Canada. And in the United States, the Biden administration prepares to use the guise of infrastructure to pay for another round of massive spending. And Bree is going to talk a little bit about a show that she really enjoys called The Chosen, and we're going to talk more about that. So with that being said, I'll hand you back over to Bree so she can kick us off with some breaking news. Bree, what do you have for us today?
So today, Easter Monday, begins a week of just amazing graces, including leading up to the big feast, the Feast of Divine Mercy on Sunday. So don't forget to do your Chaplet of Divine Mercy every day for your novena, and that will hopefully add graces to you in your day-to-day life, but also lead you up to the Feast of Divine Mercy. So one of the big things out of Rome this past week was the annual Urbi et Orbi blessing from Pope Francis. And before we throw to Adrian to put up for our viewers, from my terrazzo, the full Urbi et Orbi blessing from Pope Francis, I would highly recommend people to go to the full Vatican site, vatican.va, and you can find the entire blessing that was given by Pope Francis. It was really interesting because not just the blessing, but he had some remarks about what has happened the past year, including the virus, but also really focused on Christian persecution. But there was an element missing there. And Joey, after the Urbi et Orbi, which, by the way, when you're listening to this, when you receive the Pope's blessing, it's a full indulgence, everyone. So with a full indulgence, some of the conditions mean that within a week of receiving the full indulgence, you are to go to confession and you're to receive our Eucharistic Lord and pray for the Holy Father. You receive a full indulgence for this. So I'm going to ask now that Adrian throw that up, this video I took on Sunday, and then we'll talk a little bit about the element that was missing.
Sancti Apostoli Petrus et Paulus, de quorum potestate et autoritate confidimus, ipse intercedam pro nobis ad Domino. Amen. Plecibus et meritis Beate Maria semper Virginis, Beati Michaelis Arcangeli, Beati Ioannis Baptiste, et Sanctorum Apostolorum Petri et Pauli, et Omnium Sanctorum, miseratur vesti omnipotens Deus, et dimissis omnibus peccatis vestis, perducat vos, Iesus Christus, ad vitam aeternam. Indulgentiam, absolutionem, et remissionem omnium peccatorum vestrorum, spatium vere et fructuose penitentiae, cur sempre penitens et emendazione vitae, gratiam et consolazione Sancti Spiritus, et finalim perseverantiam in bonis superibus, tribuat vobis omnipotens et misericors Dominus. Et benedictio Dei Omnipotentis, Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, descenda super vos et maniat semper.
Okay, and as we see, that was, for those of you who are watching, that was from my terrazzo. You're hearing in the background St. Peter's Basilica ringing out the Easter year. And what's really important, too, is to understand that it doesn't really matter if you have issues or questions with regards to certain personalities in the Vatican, in the Holy See, the pontificate, whatnot. This blessing every year comes from the authority of the chair of Peter. It's been done since really the early Christian history in Rome, and it is such a blessing to receive it every year. So, Joey, what are your thoughts as a somewhat new Catholic? Did you ever know about the Urbi et Orbi, and did you see some of the elements that were missing potentially on the Pope's discussion before receiving that blessing?
So, again, I feel like a broken record. We talk about this every week, despite the fact that it's not planned sometimes. Last week it was, but this week it's not. So in the translation to the blessing, he speaks a lot about different areas in the world and areas of conflict and what we can do better. But again, unsurprisingly to many, there was no mention of China,
Right.
And the persecution of Christians and other religious people in China. So it's again we get complete silence from the Vatican on it. It's a little sad to see that. But aside from that, it was very nice that he did call out a lot of the things, like the conflict that's going on in Myanmar, which if you like democracy or you think that people should be able to represent themselves freely, then you should feel strongly about what's going on in Myanmar. And not so much that it's just he ignores that one. We talk about all the other ones, but it's the glaringly obvious omissions that happen that it's more of what's not said than what is said. That starts to become apparent to me. So that was my takeaway.
Yes, and even Breitbart went out with an op-ed on this particular situation, which is the glaringly obvious lack of communication with regards to anything that's happening in China. As we start to see, and as we have discussed in the last few weeks, we have been seeing this growing show of force. And you know, when we talk about, you know, de-escalation of force, disarmament, integral disarmament, as this last conference took place, we are also seeing, you know, more show of force with regards to Taiwan and engagement with, say, the government forces in Myanmar. And it is one of those things that I think we have to start to question why. And I think it's not just you know, we laymen questioning why, but I know that Cardinal Zen has come out multiple times now asking for the Pope to speak out. I don't think he can be the lone voice anymore. So I would encourage the laymen, because we're kind of the workhorses, right? We're the ones who have to go and speak to our bishops, our priests, to encourage them to reach out to the Holy Father and encourage him at this point to engage in discussion, even if it means behind the scenes with regards to China, because, you know, it is something that it was not how can I say this in a correct way? It was something that was, like you said, glaringly obvious, but not just to us. It was very much so, and this is coming from sources on the ground over there, to the Chinese, the suffering Chinese in the church. So, but, you know, going back again, this is a blessing. This is a blessing for the church and for the world. And you hear the Holy Father in the blessing itself only give the blessing for the remission of sins, but also for, this aspect of unity. And I think unity is a key term that's used quite a bit in this pontificate. And was this something that you found, Joey, as we talk about with regards to persecution? Do you find yourself in this time of Easter, especially experiencing it in Rome for the first time? Did you find that you had a sense of this kind of universality of the Catholic Church going and seeing all of the traditions behind Easter, even the food traditions? What are your thoughts on that, especially coming from a very diverse and kind of secular United States?
So the food is really what I quite enjoy. It's like the connection between the food is probably the thing that sticks out the most when it comes to some of these things. But the eating of fish on Saturday, and then eating lamb on Sunday. Those are interesting. Like, that's not something that is really like we eat ham and turkey in
Right.
my family back in the United States. So we didn't
Yes.
really. There's not the symbolism is there. That's fascinating to me, just being outside of the United States and enjoying Easter. But being more in tune with a lot of the things and seeing the juxtaposition of what happens here in Rome, what happens here across Europe and in Asia, and how everyone's kind of celebrating and what everyone does. That's really fascinating and interesting to me, especially when it comes to people that aren't or can't. They're not being allowed to do these things, and why not?
Right.
As Christians, we've been celebrating Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter for thousands of years now. And so what makes it different? Why is it different now? Why do we treat it differently now? And that's, we're going to talk about it a little bit after the break, but that's what I get out of it. And it's been kind of a solemn week and a week of reflection for me and figuring out just a lot of things. And
Right.
I hope everyone took that time to take that and reflect on their faith, them personally, how they can grow. All of these things is just because it's just different. The atmosphere is different outside of the United States when it comes to this. Not that it doesn't exist in the United States, but for me personally, it's much different. Yeah.
And Joey, it's, as you said, it's been a solemn week, but it's also been very muted here compared to how it usually is in Italy, because we've been in red lockdown in most of Rome and most of Italy. And, we're coming up to a hard break, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment as well. But, we're talking about, this is Intersections, our show, for those of you joining, and we're crossing faith and culture and current events right now. And one of the big current events is the continued COVID, measures. And, before we go into what we have seen in the way of videos with regards to interruption of masses in England, in Ireland, what we heard of in Ireland and Canada, I want to kind of make a note, and I put this up on my Twitter, and you can see it, but did you see the statement that was made by the Prime Minister of England with regards to Easter and Christians in general, and for those of you who haven't seen it, please go over to my Twitter page because you'll be able to see it firsthand. But the Prime Minister of England, I think for the first time has ever in the history of England, and many people have agreed, of course, I can't corroborate that. I'll have to go further to see. But he came out and said, this is the holiest festival in the Christian year. And he came out and he said, Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. He came out and said this officially as the Prime Minister of England. So what are your thoughts on that before we go in and talk about what happened actually in his London, with regards to some persecution in the next segment?
So before I have to Joe McLean myself off, but the important thing is that it's nice to hear things. It's nice to hear words, but our actions oftentimes speak louder than those words. So if he backs it up a little bit, then I'll be more impressed. But it is nice to see that kind of leadership, at least from a Christian, on that. So that's where I'll leave that.
Now, we'll be back shortly, and we'll be talking about the persecution of Christians in England. So just like Joey said, words are really important, but so are actions. We look forward to talking with you. This is Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events. We'll be back.
Have you ever dialogued with someone who espouses relativism, which says there is no truth, or it might be true for you, but not for me? It's pretty frustrating. Deep down, we know these claims are false, but we often don't know why. Here's the reason. To say there is no truth is a contradiction. The assertion is tantamount to saying it's true that there is no truth. Plain absurdity. Now, the other position, there is no absolute truth, just truth relative to the individual set of beliefs, is problematic as well. The usage of the verb is implies an assertion about the objective order of things. It's the same thing as saying it's absolutely true that there is no absolute truth, which of course is a contradiction. No matter how the relativist slices the pie, he ends up with a contradiction, making relativism an unreasonable worldview. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Looking for a Catholic university where the greatest works of Western and Catholic tradition are the foundation for learning, all in an environment that is faithful to the magisterium? Recommended by the Cardinal Newman Society, the University of Dallas offers an exceptional liberal arts education, preserving the wisdom of the past while preparing students for world-changing futures. Academically excellent, always faithful. Apply today at udallas.edu.
And welcome back. This is Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events. This is Bree Dail, your host, and my co-host Joey Meugniot, and I are joining you from Rome, Italy. And Joey and I were talking in last segment about just closing up, talking about Easter and some of the events that occurred in Easter in Rome, but we also were talking about some of the events in England, out of England, including the Prime Minister's statement. Joey, you said in last segment that words are really important, but so are actions. Why don't you talk a little bit about why you said that?
I'd love to. So I started paying more and more attention to some of the news, and especially when it comes to Catholic news and Christian news, for obvious reasons. And so when I saw this come across my Twitter feed, I was like, oh, okay, let's see what's going on here. So if you haven't seen the video, we'll put a link in the description below, and you can check it out later if you have seen it. But basically, in a move that Henry VIII would have been, he would have approved of, police showed up at Christ the King Polish Roman Catholic Church in, I think it's Belém, Wandsworth, which is south of London. They told everyone to disperse, or they could face fines and possible arrest. The police then stood by as everyone orderly filed their way out of the church. And afterwards, the parish came out and said that the police greatly overreached and exceeded their jurisdiction, and that the police didn't even understand the laws that they were required to enforce. The church then said that they were simply adhering to mask and sanitation and distance requirements. So everyone there was wearing a mask. Everyone there had sanitized properly, and the pews had been sanitized, and everything had been sanitized, and that they were spaced out in accordance with the law. And that's crazy. The video is some people sensationalize the video quite a bit, but the video is still pretty moving if you just watch the video and look at what happens. The police walk in. And they say what they have to say. They get in they get in and they move. Yeah. Okay. Here's the video. So perfect. Love it. Great. So
yeah, we're watching the
stand
video.
by. Yeah. So then they stand by and watch everyone move them out. So if you're on the radio and you can't see this, you can go to youtube.com/grnonline and look at this, watch the video later, or check the link in the description. We'll put a link to the video somewhere as well. But you're seeing everyone file orderly out of this. And Bree, I think you might have been the person that I saw post this or mention it, and I watched it from there. So how did you feel about this, seeing all these people?
So if you're seeing this right now, you're seeing one of the first things that is really noticeable is that before the police go up to within the sanctuary, which is a sacred area. It's a sacred area, and they just walk up to the sanctuary. Now, who knows if they knew that was not permitted, but especially during mass. But we watch the priest kind of just stand there. We don't really see anybody within the Polish community stand up and say, "Hey, you've got to get out of there," which is kind of surprising because the Poles are usually pretty intensely. They make sure that things like this don't happen. But one of the things that I find very interesting is that you see all of these children watching this. The formation of the children at this point is very clear. They're being formed in this way, that this is permitted. And I think that that's something that's really concerning. Afterwards, the parish came out and said, "Hey, this was incorrectly done," and who knows if they had much of a choice. Although we're going to talk in a second about another Polish minister who took it into his own hands to kick the police out of this was in Canada, so same law abides. And Joey, one of the things that really concerns me about this whole situation is how easily it was done, and then how easily it was manipulated for, media purposes. So I actually even saw, some of these, and I put it up on my Twitter feed. Hey, here's an example of something that really happened. We don't need to do anything more than just report on it, right, Joey? It doesn't need to be used for inflammatory rhetoric purposes, like, the police invaded and, crashed something. So I think that we have to be very careful in putting our own, again, I've spoken about this so many times, but putting our own perspectives as journalists onto something that happens, instead just, reporting on what happened. But Joey, what are your thoughts on what we saw there versus what we're going to discuss next, which was in Canada?
Yeah, everyone was, so they weren't rude about it. Okay. It felt like they were trying to do their job, but at some point, someone will need to stand up and say, like, "Hey, I know this is my job, but I don't know that this is exactly how we should be executing this if everyone's clearly doing what they should be doing." Or they just need to be better trained and better prepared to enforce some of these laws or rules or decrees or mandates or guidance that they're getting from whomever. A lot of times there isn't actually a law that hasn't been passed, so not every country is the same. Most times it's executive orders or mandates. There's not actually a law been passed. There's not a standing, it hasn't been codified into an actual law. But what I find interesting about this particular parish is that the police showed back up on Easter Sunday, but they were unable to shut down worship as there was no violations for them to justify their actions. They just stood outside and watched everybody because they were clearly, by that point, a lot of the parishioners knew what was going on and what to watch for. So everyone was on their best behavior. They were adhering to all of the regulations and laws that they were supposed to. The things that we have accepted as a society in the name of safety appear to have reached a peak. The people will only suffer through this type of action from their governments for so long before they eventually will start to push back or at least say, this is it. And I think that church, civic, and cultural leaders have got to start standing up, draw a line in the sand, and say, no more. We're going to have the discussion about it. We can talk about it, but no more. The days of the just carte blanche, just continuing to do whatever we're doing and just accepting it, we need to have some discussion, some dialogue about what is acceptable and what is not. And when it comes to constitutionally protected rights or faith and things that have stood for thousands of years and things that we've done for thousands of years, now all of a sudden for safety, we're like, oh, it's for safety. Safety, guys, everything's for safety. We have to be safe. Everything's safety related now.
Right. And, one of the things that we saw here, Joey, in Italy is that, there was a very muted Easter, as we were discussing last segment. And for those of you who are joining, this is Intersections Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events. And we're reporting from Rome. And, Easter was muted. There were parishes who had to really abide by strict numbers of people who were there, and just like you said, police were showing up. There was a higher level of police. Like the Italian government brought in more military and police to be present to enforce red lockdown during Easter. and to ensure that parishes were abiding. And I know from one of the traditional Latin Mass parishes here, San Trinita in Dei Pellegrino, that they were having to release tickets for so many people to be able to go to Mass every day during the Triduum, and that the police were watching and noting to whether or not people were abiding by the law. And I know at my parish at San Celso in Giulio, which is also a traditional Latin Mass, that on Good Friday we didn't receive the Eucharist, which is not heard of. I mean, it was a 2.5 hour long service, and at the end of it, we weren't even able to receive the Eucharist because of the lockdown. Now, Joey, we're going to talk about Canada in a second and what happened there. But did you know that there are individuals here that are scheduling mass protests in Rome for this week as a response to the shutdown? People are losing their minds. They're losing their homes, their businesses. And these are restaurant and cafe owners who have had enough. I'll be covering this for the Epoch Times in real time, and we'll be reporting. But Joey, is it going to be protests, or do you think, people are going to have to take it and really, really force the law back into, and hold accountable leadership?
I know that, so we look at things kind of in a vacuum, right? We talk about Mass, right? But then if you take that, just look at Mass for a second. They've got tickets to go to Mass. How many people are saying, you know what? No, it's fine. We'll just, until things go back to normal, we'll just stop going. And then that turns into they never go again. It's a thing, and it's happening. So when it comes to protests and lockdowns and all these things we're talking about, some people are just like, okay, well, it's fine, whatever, it's fine, we'll just continue doing it. But if you aren't getting a paycheck and there's no end in sight, and the rhetoric or the talking points, the memos, the information that we get from government isn't consistent, right? So you're telling me I can pack myself like a sardine onto an airplane, and if I wear a mask for 8 hours, I'm good. But I can't go to Mass because there's too many people in the building and I have to have a ticket and I didn't get a ticket? That doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't make sense to anyone. And there's no one that I think can articulate a good reason as to why without sounding absolutely ridiculous. There is no sense to or rhyme or reason to any of it. And that's where we're at as a society, especially in the Western world. We look at all these things and we're like, well, wait a minute. Okay, so I wear a mask, I wash my hands, whether you get the vaccine or you don't have the vaccine, you're still wearing a mask and you still have to adhere to all of these things. And they don't make sense. Like the virus is more active after 6 p.m., so why can't I go out after 6 p.m.? And why can I do indoor dining, but I can't do outdoor dining? But I can go on a plane, but I can't go on a plane, and I can't go to Mass, but I can march in the streets with 100,000 of my closest friends. Where is any of the logic to any of that? There isn't any. That's the problem, is there isn't any. No one can make sense of any of it. And if you try to, you just sound ridiculous and disingenuous at best.
Which is the reason, Joey, for the real need for just objective and calm reporting on these things, because if we don't do that, then and we kind of bow to the other side of manipulation of data or the rhetoric, then what ends up happening is that we lose the ground that we gain in logic and reason. And it's something that you have said over and over again, which drove you from the Democratic Party and towards, being more libertarian and Republican, looking at anti-swamp, anti-establishment rhetoric. And it's one of the things that we saw with regards to just, again, use of logic and reason, but also kind of using a whip and, proverbial, and driving out of the temple from a Polish minister in Canada. So tell me a little bit about what you saw there, Joey, and what the difference was, and what you think. Do you think that this was a reasonable reaction to the presence of police and enforcers of COVID restrictions?
So not to bury the lead, but yes, I think, I'm not going to bury the lead. I think, yes, this is an acceptable response to what is happening, because you get pushed for so long before the pendulum's going to swing back the other way at some point. How hard and how fast and for how long it swings the other direction, we don't know yet. But if you haven't seen the video, and I don't know if I'm going to get surprised with the tee up of this video too, but we'll definitely put the link back and down in the description as well to watch this. But There's a Canadian pastor, is a Protestant pastor, and he is throwing the police out of his church. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why both of these stories involve Poland or the Polish people, but they
nice.
do. But something doesn't appear to be right. The pastor refuses to allow the police to enter and disrupt his service any further. They show up. He says, "Do you have a warrant?" It's a perfectly reasonable question to ask. They don't. So he says, "You have to leave." Now, he uses much more colorful language than I'm using now, but that's essentially what he says. He calls them Nazis and fascists and Gestapo for trying to come in and...
Not to say that he hasn't experienced those things.
Well,
or,
if there's any people that probably understand the ideologies behind all of those words, it's probably someone that's Polish.
Right.
So he refuses to let them enter, and he kicks them out. He refuses to talk to him. He's like, "I don't want to hear anything you have to say. I don't want anything. Don't come back without a warrant." And he keeps repeating it over and over and over again until they finally just give up and walk away. Now, they did so. They didn't cause a scene. They didn't cause a ruckus, aside from just being there in the first place. But he was right. Come back with a warrant. If you have a warrant, and we have the rule of law, we have processes and procedures, and we have things in a way to go about doing this. Aside from just showing up and then just saying, "Y'all got to go. Yep, don't like it. Nope, COVID. It's against this restriction." And you're like, "Well, we're actually following that. I don't care. Here's fines." And you're just like, "Oh, okay, I guess I'll just thank you for my fine and I'll leave now. Bye." This guy was like, no, we're not doing that. Nope, come back. There's a law here. You have to have a warrant. If you don't have a warrant, you can leave. Just leave. It's private property. You're not welcome here. You need to go. There's nothing wrong with that. He drew a line in the sand and said, no, this isn't. And if more leaders, whether they're civic or church or cultural leaders, saying the same things and doing the same things, we'd probably have a lot. There'd be a little pushback from these kind of, I don't know how to describe it well, but like this just kind of seepage of the erosion of rights that are oftentimes either every country's constitution, their constitutional rights, it kind of start to erode slowly, and we're seeing it happen rapidly, so that you can even notice it. Because sometimes they happen over a long period of time. This time they're not. We're talking about in the course of a year. People are like, a year ago we were like, okay, tinfoil hat wearing crazy people, calm down. It's not going to get like that.
Right.
And now those people are like, I told you what was going to happen, and you didn't believe me, and now look where we're at. And it's time to say enough is enough. That's my hot take on that.
Right. And I would say, Joey, one of the things that we try to bring here on Intersections is to understand, okay, well, there's a lot of complaining, a lot of opinions that are being said with regards to what's going on with the restrictions. There's always a balance, and the virus is real, and there are vaccines that are causing concern. There are vaccines that are not causing concern, and these things need to be discussed. If they're not discussed, then and if people aren't free to have their opinions and just the dialogue, or even the critical thinking that's necessary in these times, if we're not free to that, then we've chosen to give up our liberties, right? This whole idea of having the civil discussion, the civil discourse is needing it. We need to have free press to do so, but we also need to have reason and logic to do so in that face-to-face, which I think is one of the reasons why it's so difficult right now for people, is because on top of all of this, we're being restricted many times within our homes, and from having that social dialogue, that communication, which is so necessary for civility. And one of the things that, was brought up, a viewer said, his name's Bruce Tommen, came out and said on Facebook, is that common sense has become uncommon. And G.K. Chesterton, the great author and sociologist from England, came out and said, 100 years ago, that this would take place. I mean, this has been moving forward for a long time, like you said, but Joey, one of the things that we try to discuss here on Intersection is what can the mom listening right now with 4 kids do? to engage in this way? How do we? What are the results? Because we're having to deal with real serious issues here, and we've got Dr. Fauci saying on one side that things aren't going to go back to normal until like 2023. But then he'll come back and say something on the other side. So there's a lot of lack of leadership and kind of fluidity in this. So what would you say is necessary for the mom who's just wanting to take care of their kids?
So I think there's a few things that we can do, depending on the angle or the direction you want that conversation to go in. First of all, there's a lot of, there's an interesting quote that I was trying to get exactly right, but there's a Benjamin Franklin quote. And I think a lot of it, we look back in history, look to the founders, or we look to conservative thinkers or church leaders from the past. They've given us a lot of the playbooks and the tools that we need to be successful. But the quote from Benjamin Franklin is that any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both.
Wow.
So the information is there. We just need to listen to it. So what can you do for your kids? Pull in some of this information that's already available for you and paint the direction or kind of give them all the tools they need to succeed. Look at all these information, all these things these much smarter people than I am have already said. It's not like I'm coming up with this off the top of my head. I'm just looking at it through a slightly different lens. And educate, talk, discuss. Now, if that's not enough for you, okay, so then you can take action, you can get involved, you can be like the pastor says, okay, enough is enough. You can talk to your priest, you can talk to you can petition your bishop. You can, if it's on that, or if it's within the civic area, the civic realm, you can pick up the phone and call your congressperson. You
or
can
run
your
for
senator.
Congress.
Or
we're seeing that right now. A lot of people are running for Congress because they are tired of seeing the individuals who are establishment or people backed by large money who have other interests and actually not getting anything done. They're running. I think that, like him or hate him, Donald Trump actually started a movement of saying, hey, civic duty, civic responsibility, start to, if things aren't getting done, then, step up to the plate.
And we tend to forget, because it's so important and it's so in your face all the time, about federal office and Congress, Senate, the President of the United States. But if you look at where all of these rules and decrees and mandates and all these things are happening, they're happening at the local level. They're happening from the mayor and the city council. They're happening
the sheriff,
from the county
who is supposed
commissions.
to
the sheriff that's enforcing the law. These are so it was Calgary police that tried to arrest him. It wasn't the military, the Canadian military that walked in there and did this. This was and in London it was the Met. I mean, it was the Metropolitan Police Force. Like these are local, essentially. I mean, they're large because they're large areas, but they're local police force that answer to the local population, the mayor and the chief of police there, or the sheriff. If you don't like the direction your community is going in, you don't have to sit by and do nothing. You can run for school board. You don't like what your kids are being taught in school? Run for school board. Run for school board. Show up to the meetings. The decisions are made by those who show up. So if you're not there, you have to vote. That's a big one. But you also just need to show up and be part of the discussion. If you're not part of the discussion, you can't be upset that they go in a direction that you don't agree with. You need to be part of that solution. Right. So, you can show up and you can vote. You can run. Pick something that you enjoy. Pick an area that tickles your fancy. And that if you've got kids, maybe school board is a great thing. You should what your kids are getting taught in school is a whole other topic that we could go on for hours about, but be involved in these particular things. And that's what I would say is either, whether you want to be involved in politics or maybe you don't and you just want to continue to do that, but talk to your priest, talk to your family. Talk to your family and talk to them about these issues, the concerns, or the ideas that you have. Come to some consensus there. And I've said this.
And be open to debate. Be open to debate, right, Joey? Because, not everybody's going to have to agree with you. And that's one of the things that I think is really important to understand for civil debate. In order for you to be able to engage with others, you're not going to engage with them by use of emotion, but by use of reason. It's one of the things that really draw people to, towards polarization, is that when you hate the other individual, not for any logical or reasonable reason, but when you don't approach, you don't engage, you don't sit down in front of someone and really have a conversation, you're just going to end up there's just going to be polar opposites. Hate will continue because it's irrational, right? It's irrational. And Joey, before we go to break, it's going to be really important for people to understand that this is an ongoing conversation. We want you to be involved with this. Right now, we're not taking calls. We will in the future. But for right now, if you could put a comment, drop a comment in our comment area, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on YouTube. We want you to engage with us because we may not be seeing it a way that you are seeing it, and we want to hear from you, that civil interaction again. Joey, last thoughts before we go to break. This is Intersections, though, crossing faith, culture, and current events, and we're going to be talking about a cultural thing in the next segment, which is The Chosen. But Joey, last thoughts for you.
So we talk a lot about logic and emotion. There has got to be a balance between the two. So we can look at something from a logical perspective, but not everyone does that. A lot of people make decisions based on emotion. So if you understand that, you just need to think with that in the back of your mind, then talk about the particular topic or, whatever it is. Figure out a way to tie the emotion back to the logic. Like, okay, I know you feel this way and it's definitely very personal for you. But let's think about, X, Y, and Z, and let's talk about some of the logic that's behind it, or maybe some of the ramifications of it. There are, in the military, we have something called the second and third order of effects. Like if we do X, what does Y and Z turn out to be? If we do, how does that all look out? So you can attack a topic from a point of logic, but still bring in emotion because we are human beings. We do have emotions. Right. So we have to be able to merge those two and bridge the gap and talk to people that maybe think things more emotionally than others. I'm more logical than I am emotional, but that doesn't mean you don't have to understand them and you just have to throw logic, just raw logic at them all the time, just pound them with it. But you have to be able to have that conversation. And I think just starting the conversation is the key.
Yes. Starting the conversation is the key. And, Joey, as we're going back, we're going to be talking about, Conversation Starter, the largest crowdfunded project in the history of crowdfunding, The Chosen. But, Joey, something before we go to break that it really kind of keyed up in me. Recently, this past week, I approached a certain situation very emotionally charged, and I didn't handle it well. So, one of the things that I look at is like you said, sitting down and having that conversation, but sometimes that's not possible. And one of those things that we have to realize is that people are where they're at. We have to approach and they have free will, right? So even if someone's not willing to talk to you now about the situation, maybe they're so emotionally charged on, say, the vaccine that they're not willing to sit down and have a conversation about the virus because all they're focused on is everybody has to get vaccinated or no one should get vaccinated. We have to understand that maybe they're just not ready. And patience is a virtue, especially patience when it has to deal with your own emotions and your anger, maybe your frustration. So for that situation, I apologized, and I would publicly apologize because it was completely outside the norm for me to not be very logical and reasonable. But like you said, it's a human folly that we all have, is to bring in emotion sometimes. We're human beings. When we get back, though, we are going to be talking about The Chosen. I hope you can join us again. This is Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events. I'm your host, Bree Dail, with my co-host, Joey Meugniot, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Relativists think moral absolutes don't exist because cultures differ in their moral beliefs. But is this a rational inference? The answer is no, and here's the reason. You see, it confuses moral epistemology, the accurate knowledge of moral truths, with moral ontology, the existence of moral truths. Differing moral opinions have to do with knowledge of moral truths, or lack thereof, not their existence. Furthermore, if we say absolute moral truths don't exist because cultures disagree on them, well then we're going to have to deny the existence of absolute cosmological truths, because scientists disagree about them. But we don't want to do that because we might end up denying the objective shape of our planet and its relation to the sun. Differing moral beliefs, therefore, doesn't negate moral absolutes. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Access to clean water is something we often take for granted. When we turn on a faucet, out pours clean water that's safe for drinking. But that's not true in countries like Kenya, where the number one cause of child mortality is from drinking contaminated water. Together we can change that. Cross Catholic Outreach works with local Catholic partners around the world to transform the lives of families living in poverty. Join this mission at crosscatholic.org/bless.
Intersections with Joey Meugniot and Bree Dail. So we're going to finish off our talk today with kind of a slight interview with Bree, because I have not seen The Chosen, and I know there's a lot of information about The Chosen, and I want you to convince me why I should watch this and why it's interesting. Because I've heard you talk about it a lot, and I haven't taken the time or given it the justice that you probably think that it does. But I want to understand why you think we should, and then we can kind of take it from there. But tell me a little bit about it, and tell me why you like it and why it's been impactful for you.
Ooh, thank you so much, Joey. I appreciate this. I'm really excited about this topic because season 2, episode 1 broke yesterday. It premiered yesterday. And for people who've not seen it, you can go to YouTube and watch it for free. You can download the Chosen app for free and watch it. And what's amazing is that this is the largest crowd-funded program, project at this size that's ever been done. So when we talk about crowd-funded, I mean like Kickstarter, that kind of thing. And it started out of like a barn in the producer Dallas Jenkins' like home or farm. And it was one episode that he himself helped fund and some of his colleagues fund, which was the Nativity story. And from there, it's just blown up. And Joey, why should you watch it? Well, because there's so many other shows and other movies about the life of Jesus, right? You've got Franco Zeffirelli's very famous 1970s, beautiful, kind of stoic Jesus. Very long. I think it's like 8 hours of the life of Jesus. And then you've got, and it was broken down in episodes too and on TV, right? And then you've got The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson, amazing, hugely grossing. I think it was probably the highest grossing, one of the highest grossing films ever, translated in so many languages. And that should kind of give you an understanding that people really have a thirst for the moving picture, the video element of the life of Christ, so that they could put it in their head and then read their scripture and kind of have something that they can think on and meditate on. But this is kind of an author's adaptation, also based off of scripture scholars, Catholics, Jewish, Protestant, coming together and encouraging Dallas Jenkins to help produce this amazing kind of out-of-the-box story of the life of Jesus. And I don't know, like I'm being told right now my video has frozen. I'm not sure if that has to do with my, Joey, you might want to take over.
Audio's still good, so we can still hear you.
There, go ahead.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to be reconnecting soon for those of people who are watching this. But The Chosen is just an amazing adaptation. And it like brings the fleshiness into Christ. I think the human element into this. Go ahead, Joey.
And I'm watching the kind of like some of the clips and things that you've teed up for us to watch on this. Does it speak to you in a certain way that makes you feel something? I know we talked about emotional
Right.
in the last segment before the break, but does it make you feel like, do you feel something? Do you feel some of the teachings and the stories? Do you feel that? Does it make you think about things different logically, but then does it attach to kind of that emotional piece? So you're like pulling your heartstrings, if you will?
Yeah, so I have gone ahead and reviewed the first episode of season 2 from my terrace. I'm going to be putting that up onto Twitter shortly, so that people can see it. But Joey, yes, long and short, it does, and it's the humor, it's the human side of Jesus. It's the Jonathan does. And sorry, I have a little bit of a frog in my throat. One moment. Jonathan does an amazing element of the masculine in Jesus. And I think that that's something that's really important for people to see, especially today where people are struggling with this whole element of, can piety also be masculine? I'm sure you've seen that within the Catholic Church. It's also something that's really struggling within, the Protestant Church. And it kind of bridges what we've been talking about all day here on Intersections is what is the balance between standing up for yourself, that masculine element, and the element of piety, and it's something that was a struggle, I believe, for individuals, in England just recently. So, Joey, what would it be? What would be the risk in watching something like this? The boredom, or the element of kind of, is this going to be cheesy? Because a lot of Christian movies are kind of, I'm sorry, low budget, cheesy, and when you hear crowdfunded, pay it forward kind of thing, it does tend to sound like, ooh, this could be really low budget. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, you talked about it a little bit. I hadn't thought too much of it. I mean, usually when something's crowdfunded, you're just thinking that's something that's quite on a budget. But oftentimes, even though it's crowdfunded, the message is correct. The production value is the production value, right? The higher the production value is, the more likely people are to watch it. But sometimes that's really the message. That's why I asked you if it spoke to you on a not only a logical level, through things that you can think through, but also on an emotional level. I know I tend to be more of a logical person than I am an emotional person, but it's important because certain things like that you don't think like logically. Why does the Star Spangled Banner give me the weepy eye, and the other thing, right? Like logically, like it's the national anthem, and you start to think of what it means. What it's meant to so many people,
and that's exactly
what the sacrifices that they've done.
Right.
And then it attacks. It doesn't attack, but then it just starts to pull on the emotional side of you as well. And
right.
There's a lot of those things, and I'm curious to watch this. I'll probably watch it just because I think it's fascinating, and if we are able to talk to Jonathan when he comes to visit us in Rome. And I think
what did you
What?
just break that? What?
No.
Yes, Jonathan is planning on coming to Rome. We're not going to tell you why and how and when, but Jonathan Rumi, who is playing Jesus in The Chosen, is a Catholic, and he is a big proponent of the Divine Mercy. He's prayed and actually brought Protestants into praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet and the Rosary, buying rosary beads. I mean, this is phenomenal. This is a very unifying show, which I think is really important. A lot of Catholics have been wary because they've been concerned that there would be issues with theology in this, since Dallas is evangelical. But Dallas has been really careful and very, it's so good. You may not like how he may have cast some of the the actors into certain roles, but I have to tell you, Joey, going to this emotional side, yes, it has. There have been times, season 1, episode 3 is one of my favorites, and it's Jesus out in the deserted places rather. He is camped out.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. You're seeing him, doing really masculine things. What would have it been like for him to live on his own, for a while before he began his ministry? What was that like, really? What was his discernment to when his public ministry would start? And it incorporates children in this, and it's amazing. It's an amazing episode. The first episode, when you get to see the deliverance of Mary Magdalene, is extremely powerful. She is possessed. And this is something that we know in Scripture that, or what we believe is that she was delivered by Christ from demons, and that's not something unheard of for individuals who have endured suffering and abuse as they show within this particular episode. But season 2, episode 1. Definitely had some really amazing points in it, and a conversation between John and Jesus really hit home. So look forward to seeing that on my Twitter feed soon, and please share it out because I'm going to continue to kind of cover season 2. Joey, what are your thoughts?
Well, I definitely think I'm going to take the time to watch it. I think it sounds interesting and fascinating enough, so I'm glad that it spoke to you in a way. And just knowing you the way that I do, I would say that it's worth at least a watch for me. So that's my two cents on that. I think I'm definitely going to take the time to watch it. It comes with Bree's stamp of approval, so that means that you could probably watch it as well and feel pretty safe in that. But I will say, we're coming out to the end of our show. If you found value in our show today, if you wouldn't mind, give this video a like if you're watching it online, or leave us a comment in the description below or in the comment section below. And if you're on the radio, jump on over to youtube.com/grnonline and watch this video, like, comment. There's a lot of other content there that you can take the time to listen to if you're on a long drive or you're working out or you're just hanging out. Just throw it on, listen to it, and be a part of our community. And I'd like to ask you, try to join us every week if you can. I like talking to you, and I'd like to have you around. And as we continue to grow, and I want you to be part of our community. And share this with others if you think they would like it as well. So with that being said, I'll throw it back over to Bree. We can finish it out, and I hope you have an amazing week.
Everyone, it's Divine Mercy Sunday this next week. This is the time to mend fences. This is the time to engage with others. This is the time to really apply the Easter message of redemption and forgiveness and mercy. And so we hope this Easter week, will bring you many, many graces. We are praying for you, and we're asking for you to pray for us as we continue to grow this show. And we look forward to seeing you next Monday, hearing all about your Divine Mercy Sunday. But for now, this is Bree and Joey for Intersections, where faith and culture and current events unite. And we will see you next week. God bless you.